Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I'm gonna hit the chime.
Hello, welcome to our service. We are the Rogue Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, or RUF, in Ashland, Oregon, and my name is Julie Gillis. I'm a part of RUF for its incredible music. It's beautiful, thank you so much. We're so happy to welcome you to our service, both online and in person. We want to especially thank the members of our stream team who are helping make the online services happen, and the members of the neighborhood team who make the welcome for our on-site congregation. If you're a newcomer, we invite you to sign up for our mailing list on rvuuf.org. You'll receive a weekly email that gives you all the information about whether you want to join us on Sunday mornings in person or online, and you'll learn more about other great things going on here at RUF. Today, for example, we're going to have the listening ears over here beside the organ after the service. That's members of the tripod or the board who'd love to hear great ideas from you. We're so glad to have you with us for this service, and we invite you to join us in our mission, embracing diversity, empowering connection, and engaging in the work. We begin each service by acknowledging that our building is built on land that began as the home of the Cow Creek Umpqua, Takelma, Shasta, and Lagawa people. We remind ourselves that Indigenous peoples are part of our community and continue to experience the effects of colonization. We are committed to fighting for the worth and dignity of Indigenous people both in our community and around the world. These services are part of that work. Welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Good morning. I'm Intern Minister Eli Poore, and it's my pleasure and privilege to serve here at ROOF as well as the wider community of the Southern Oregon UU Partnership, and to add my welcome this morning to Julie's. I'm so glad that you've made time to be here with us this morning. We light our chalice, symbol of Unitarian Universalism, with the following words. We light this chalice for the brave and the tender, for the hearts that hesitate, yet choose to open, for the voices that tremble, yet choose to speak, for the souls that risk love, even when fear whispers stay hidden. May this flame remind us that vulnerability is not weakness, but the doorway to connection.
Good morning. Even earlier than usual. Our first piece this morning is going to be the teal hymnal. If you would like to rise in body or spirit and look at 1008. Is my mic not on? When our heart is in a holy place. Is my mic not on? Is it on now? Yeah. Ah, good. Sometimes it moves when I'm sitting down. So, here we go. I'm going to do all the verses. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. Back to the beginning. Heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Suzanne Anderson, and I'm a member of the anti-racism team. And I'm here today to just tell you a little bit about the Ashland Sunrise Project. The Ashland Sunrise Project is a truth and reconciliation coalition addressing our community's history as a sundown town. What do we aim to do? The Sunrise Project aims to help former sundown towns develop new identities as sunrise communities, the opposite to a sundown town. Sunrise communities are places in which everyone can feel safe and respected and can call this space their home. You might be wondering how you could help create a sunrise community. Well, we have one here in Ashland. And all you need to do is stay in touch with them and hear about what they're doing. But here's a couple of things you could be thinking about. When we're creating a sunrise community, they were thinking about being caring and curious. Start a conversation with someone different from you and listen to what they have to say. Be welcoming. Break the ice with a friendly greeting when someone new enters the room or the circle. Learn our history. The local history is important so that we may talk about it. And share your personal stories. We want to have our own stories told so that we listen to each other. So we light the candle today for building community and our Sunrise Project. I have some brochures. And if you'd like to talk to me after the service, I can give you a brochure and tell you how you could stay in touch with them by email, because they have wonderful, wonderful meetings and programs here at SOU, sometimes here at Roof, sometimes at the Peace House. So easy access to some really great folks. Thank you. Good morning.
It is our practice each time we gather to light a candle for peace. We take this moment to call to mind our communities, our commitment to peace of mind, peace in our home, peace in our communities, and peace in the world. Today's words are a poem from Eli Poore, "The Softest Thing." The softest thing in the world is water. Yet it carves its name into the ribs of mountains, slips through iron gates, smooths the jagged edges of everything that thought could not break. A hand on the shoulder, a voice in the dark, the smallest opening in a locked doors, these are the things that heal. But a clenched fist, a hardened heart, only teach a body to brace. We were told strength was silence, was never bending, never yielding. But the trees that survive the storm are the ones that know when to bow, when to let go, when to lean into the wind rush without splintering. We build walls and call them peace, mistake distance for safety, quiet for resolution, but peace is not the hush of held breath, not the absence of fire. It's not found in the cold space that opens between us. Peace is the courage to stay, to sit inside the wreckage and hold the weight of what is real, to let the heart crack like morning, to reach across the rubble and say, I love you, I see you, I will not turn away. Peace is 1,000 small surrenders, not of dignity, not of justice, but of the fear that keeps us apart, the fear that tells us to close our hands when we were made to open them. So let us be rain against stone, wind moving through the branches of birch and pine, salt in the breaking tide, 1,000 palms stretched out. Let us be soft enough to let each other in, strong enough to stay. For in the wearing down, in the breaking open, the whole world begins anew.
And we'll now have our children's story this morning. Our story is called Julian is a Blessing, or I'm sorry, Julian is a Mermaid. Julian is also a blessing, but Julian is a mermaid. Anyone who'd like to join me, please come down to the front and we'll read it together. Hi there. Julian is a Mermaid. This is written by Jessica Love. Some great photos here. This is a boy named Julian, and this is his abuela. And those are some mermaids. Julian loves mermaids. There's some photos with Julian and some other children swimming. And another photo of a mermaid. Do you all like mermaids? I like mermaids a lot. Some more mermaid photos with a fish. Vámonos, mijo. This is our stop. There's Julian and his abuela. There's some mermaids.
And I'm learning how to color.
That's amazing. Are you coloring some mermaids? Yeah, a unicorn. Unicorns go right along with mermaids. Abuela, did you see the mermaids? I saw them, mijo. Abuela, I am also a mermaid. I'm going to take a bath. You be good, Abuela says. Julian has a good idea. What do you think Julian's doing? He's changing clothes. Looks like they're putting some things in their hair, taking the curtains down. And comes into the bathroom with Julian's abuela. Oh, uh-oh, they say. Come here, mijo. My little one. For me, abuela? For you, Julian. Abuela's giving Julian some pearls. Where are we going? You'll see, says abuela. Some sibling love. Mermaids, whispers Julian. Like you, mijo, let's join them. Look at all of the mermaids. And they do. There's Julian with all of the mermaids. The end. It takes courage and vulnerability to be a mermaid especially when you're young and maybe people think that you're a boy and boys shouldn't like mermaids. I'm glad you all joined me today. I hope you have a great day.
Today's reading is an excerpt from a blog post from McKenna Berry on Jewish philosophers Martin Buber's I, It, and I, Thou encounters. It opens with the following quote: "I believe that the key to creating society that is nourishing, empowering, and healing for everyone lies in how we relate to one another." Berry begins, "I came across Martin Buber's work early in my studies of existentialism and existential psychology. Buber's philosophy was genuine and showed his love and hope for humanity. His existential philosophical piece entitled I, Thou is a philosophical discussion on how we relate to each other consciously and unconsciously and what makes us human. This is what drew me to his idea. Buber introduced two distinct ways of relating I, Thou, and I, It. In the I, Thou encounter, we relate to each other as authentic beings without judgment, qualification, or objectification. I meet you as you are, and you meet me as who I am. In the I-thou relationship, what is key is how I am with you in my own heart and mind. The I-it encounter is the opposite in that we relate to another as object, completely outside of ourselves. Let's step out of philosophical language. How does this show up in reality? I remember when I was an intern working at a shelter for families who were experiencing homelessness. The greatest asset that I had was the relationships I formed with the families that lived at this shelter. It was both hard and wonderful to listen to their stories. I found that I carried them in my mind and heart even after being away for days. I would relate to them even when they were not with me in the room. I would think about the last conversation I had with a mother about her feelings of grief around a lost family member. My relationship was constant with her, even if she was not there. This was an experience of her becoming part of me and my own identity. How? Her stories were always on my mind. As a result, her stories became part of my own stories that I am reflecting on now, and that relating was, or rather is, powerful. The I-it relating would be radically different. I have been participating in community organizations for nearly 15 years. Over the years, I've sat in numerous meetings with the agenda of helping the homeless. The term the homeless distances us from seeing the humanity and the families that I was working with at the shelter. They were more than homeless families. Being homeless was a state of being, not who they were as individuals. A few years ago, I began to shift my internal and external language away from using the term the homeless as a way to describe the lovely folks I was working with. In doing so, I moved from the I-it relationship that Buber described as being a relationship based on seeing others as things, or in this case as objects, which can easily be dehumanizing. The I-thou relationship, where one meets the other as who they are rather than what they represent, is powerful and healing. Rather than looking at a mother who is living in a shelter as a homeless mother, we can see her as a mother and a woman with a name and a personal story to share. Her story becomes part of our lives and in turn part of our humanity. When I consider Buber's philosophy in relationship to social change, how we relate to one another would be a great service. On a conscious level, we can acknowledge how the labels and assumptions we have about others impact our conversations and relationships. On a more intimate level, we can acknowledge how we hold each other in our thoughts, even when we are not with others. It takes work to be open to such a deeply intimate relationship with others. I still think of families I had the opportunity to be with at the shelter. I hold them in my heart, and in a sense, I still have what I would consider a genuine relationship with them, even if they're not here with me. That holding of another is I-thou relating. It is this type of connection to others on a spiritual and emotional level that can only lead to true relating and compassion for one another.
Our centering song this morning is about the chalice flame. And you know how a flame kind of goes up and comes down and goes up and comes down? Well, that's what this song does. It's sort of a musical onomatopoeia. Anyway, so it goes like this. The words are, rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, bring to us comfort. Golly, it just went. Well, I'll tell you when we get there. I have to do the music or I can't remember the words. Anyway, so the first part goes like this. Rise up, O flame. Just that with me. Rise up, O flame. And then it goes back up. By thy light glowing, by thy light glowing. Good, just that much. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing. And then the next part is, bring to us beauty, comfort, and joy. Bring to us beauty, comfort, and joy. Just that much again. Bring to us beauty, comfort, and joy. From the beginning. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing. Bring to us beauty, comfort, and joy. One more time. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing. Bring to us beauty, comfort, and joy. See, now you can sing that song in your head every time you say a flame.
It was beautiful. Thank you so much, Julie. It sounded lovely singing together also. It's good to be with you all again this Sunday. It's been a while since I've seen you, so it's good to see your faces again, to gather in the sacred space that we create together, especially during this time where fear and division weave their way through our culture. Our presence here together really matters. This community really matters. Authentic relationships are the foundation of true community, and community is the antidote to division. But authenticity, both with ourselves and with one another, can only take root in vulnerability, the courage to show up as we are, in all of our complexity and all of our truth, with all of the bumps and warts and things that maybe we'd rather not show sometimes. When we gather in this way, wholly and openly, without pretense, we begin the sacred work of creating beloved community. And in doing so, we resist and interrupt the forces that seek to keep us separate, that tell us we must harden ourselves in order to be safe. May this time together be a practice in that courage. May this space hold us just as we are. There are many different types of sermons. Some are essays, some are calls to action, some are woven through with histories, yet others are thought experiments. Some are kind of boring or lackluster, despite our best efforts. Today, I'd like to offer one that's a love letter. Hopefully it won't also be the boring sort. This love letter is to those of us who hesitate before speaking, who weigh every word, careful not to say too much, who have learned that silence sometimes can feel safer than being misunderstood. This is for those of us who carry fear of a future that is not promised. Walter, can we switch to the pulpit mic? Thank you. Is that any better? Yeah. Thank you. Seem to be having some issues with the wireless. Back to the love letter. This love letter is for those of us who carry fear of a future that is not promised. We might wake in the night with the weight of uncertainty pressing against our ribs. We've been told that we have to have it all figured out, when all we really have is this moment, this breath. This is a love letter for all of us who have ever held our breath before knocking on a door, unsure if we'll be welcomed, unsure if we even belong, who have spent years waiting on thresholds, afraid to take up space. This is a love letter to those of us who have been hurt before and who are still learning how to open again, who know that trust is a delicate thing. We who have stitched ourselves together too many times to count, who want to believe in love, in community, and softness, but have not yet been given a reason to, or still need convincing or reminding. This is for those of us who have had to tuck away parts of ourselves in order to be accepted, who have asked to be smaller, quieter, more palatable, who have contorted ourselves into versions that might fit outside expectations, but not our own truth. For those of us who have spent a lifetime trying to be perfect, believing that if we get it just right, if we are good enough, smart enough, successful enough, happy enough, then maybe, just maybe, we'll be safe and even loved. This is a love letter to those of us who have donned armor to survive, who have learned to keep our edges sharp, our walls high, who have worn strength like a shield, even when we longed for rest. This is for you, for all of us, for the ones who have had to fight to be here, for the ones who are still fighting, and for those of us who are learning slowly that there is another way. I came to you all in August with experiences that are not common in many UU spaces, though they are far more common in general than most people assume. The process of bringing my whole self to these spaces, of being vulnerable, can feel scary and oftentimes isolating. Any one of these experiences or identities might set me apart, but together they've had the effect of making me feel like an outsider often, no matter where I am. As a child, I excelled academically. I entered college when I was 15. But in my late teens and early 20s, trauma caught up with me. What started as a prescription for a soccer injury spiraled into opioid use after my dad died tragically. I spent years navigating incarceration, addiction, and houselessness. After my second release from prison, I entered treatment, built a successful career, and years later, I reconnected with the UU Church, where I found community before as a teenager, and eventually, I applied for a seminary program at Star King. I was certain that I wouldn't be accepted, but I was. I had built a personal mythology around overcoming struggle and rebuilding myself, but I was warned before I began seminary that seminary was a process that turned you inside out, and it did. I began to see the ways that my experiences, especially around incarceration, had impacted me when I thought I had come out okay. I had become more guarded, hypervigilant, and struggled with this near constant sense of not belonging. Nightmares of withdrawal in jail or being rearrested had come several times a week since my release, and until then I had assumed this as being normal. I still cannot sit in restaurants with people walking behind me. Police interactions trigger panic. The weight of my past and the stigma of my experiences have made me feel that I have to prove myself, that I have to do more, be more, just to be enough. In some ways, these fears are justified, and the reality of having to prove myself is real. It's been a survival tactic. Also, there are few people who understand firsthand the intersections of houselessness, addiction, carceral systems, transness and queerness, and fewer still who make it out alive. I don't know of any others in UU ministry. Street and prison culture both demand a kind of survival that makes vulnerability a risk and a deficit, and it's difficult to heal from this. My worst nightmares are not of going back itself, but of what I would have to break down in myself in order to survive again in those contexts. I also fear the way these things emerge in me, the ways that imposter syndrome rears its head, particularly when I do share the whole of who I am and where I come from, times like this. Sharing all of myself in ministry, including the parts that make me afraid, the parts that are still growing, the parts that aren't easy to talk about, is frightening. And yet, what choice do I have but to be my full self? What choice do any of us have? We can't remove ourselves from the way we've been shaped by our experiences. We can't separate ourselves from our identities. We are all that we are in this moment, and that's enough. Our inherent worth is not conditional. Vulnerability, breaking open, sharing the fullness of who we are is what dismantles division and reclaims our humanity. But let's be honest, this vulnerability can be really terrifying. It's walking into a room without armor. It's letting someone see the messy, complicated, unpolished truth of who we are and hoping that they don't turn away. We all have reasons to build walls. Some of us learned young that the world is not gentle with an unguarded heart. For some, that lesson came through loss, a love that left, a trust that was broken, a time that we needed help and no one came. For others, it came through silence, a home where feelings were swallowed, where pain was ignored, where love was rationed in careful doses. For some, it came through in all of these, in some form or another, at one time or another. For those of us who have known trauma, which is most of us, whether in the form of grief or heartbreak, natural disasters, illness, or through systems of harm, vulnerability doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it can sometimes feel impossible. And when we experience trauma, whether personal, systemic, or generational, our nervous system adapts. We learn that it's not safe to trust, it's not safe to be seen, it's not safe to let people in, and so we protect ourselves. Some of us shrink, making ourselves small, unobtrusive, never asking for too much, never drawing attention. Some of us become fortresses, building sharp edges and high walls, ensuring no one gets close enough to touch what's tender. Some of us become performers, agreeable, charming, making sure we are liked, but never truly known. And these strategies help us survive. They keep us safe in a world that isn't always kind. But the walls don't just keep pain out, they keep love out too. When we never risk trust, we never experience true belonging. When we craft a facade of perfection, we become inaccessible. And while our defenses may have served us in the past, They can also trap us in loneliness, keeping us from the connections that we all were born for. So how do we unlearn this fear? How do we open ourselves to the possibility of connection, to vulnerability? Fortunately, we're not bound by these patterns. Through neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, we can unlearn survival strategies that no longer serve us and relearn connection. Each time we choose openness instead of suspicion, softness instead of hardness, presence instead of avoidance, when we become soft and fluid like water, we can carve a new path, even through stone. This is where Martin Buber offers us a tool to help rewire the way we relate to the world. Buber wrote about the two fundamental ways of engaging with others that Julie shared in the reading earlier, I-it and I-thou. An I-it relationship is transactional. It's when we see someone not as a full, complex human, but as an object, something to manage, to use, to avoid, or even to tolerate at a safe distance. It's when we interact with people based on roles rather than real presence. And think about how often we do this. A grocery clerk scans our items and we barely make eye contact. A coworker tells us about their weekend and we nod politely, already thinking of our own to-do list. A stranger asks for help and we walk past, lost in our own world. These are I-it moments. They aren't necessarily outright cruel. They aren't even necessarily wrong. They're fairly common, but they're thin. They lack depth, they lack connection, and they lack presence. We're not fully present to others, and often they are not present to us. But I-thou is different. I-thou is when we truly see and are seen. It's when we drop the performance. It's when we show up as ourselves, when we recognize the sacred in another person, when we choose presence over distance, love over control, relationship over transaction. I-thou moments happen when we pause long enough to truly listen, when we look into someone's eyes and say, I see you, I hear you, you matter. They happen when we risk bringing our whole selves into relationship, not the curated version, not the carefully managed image, but the full and messy and beautiful truth of who we are. And here's the kicker. I-thou is also where the divine is found. Buber says that when we enter into a real, authentic, unguarded relationship, we are touching something holy. God, the sacred, the universe, whatever word you use, does not dwell in isolation. It's found in relationship, in connection, in the space between us when we open to each other. This means that if we never risk vulnerability, we never fully encounter the sacred. If we look around, we find fingerprints of this fear of vulnerability everywhere. It's in the way we avoid hard conversations, choosing distance over discomfort. It's how we guard the parts of ourselves we fear will set us apart, the way we hold our cards close to our chest, not realizing that this very act of self-protection is what keeps us from real connection. It's how we label and sort each other, turning complex people into headlines, strangers into enemies, neighbors into them. Seeing requires that we set down our certainty about others and ourselves. Seeing requires that we acknowledge the humanity in someone whose experience is different from our own. And this fear of vulnerability is not just personal, it's cultural, it's systemic. It's how white supremacy culture and racism continues, how homophobia and transphobia continues, how economic inequality continues, because it's easier to keep people at a distance than it is to truly meet them. It's easier to reduce someone to a stereotype than it is to hear their story. It's easier to fear someone than it is to love them. But here's what we need to remember. We will never heal without connection. We will never build justice without relationship. To repair what's broken, we must be willing to see and be seen. We must be willing to see each other not as enemies, not as labels, but as human beings with stories, wounds, and longing just like our own. And this is not passive work. One of the most radical and courageous things we can do is stand in front of one another unguarded and say, "Here I am, and I will not turn away." And here's the truth, beloveds. This is not just about how we see others. It's also about how we see ourselves. Too often we engage with our own selves in an I-it way. We treat ourselves as projects to be fixed, managed, improved. We speak to ourselves with harshness, with judgment, with the same fear that keeps us from opening up to others. But what if we practiced an I-thou relationship with ourselves too? What if we fed all of our relationships by meeting our own hearts the way we wish to be met? What if we wrote love letters, not just to each other, but to the tenderest parts of ourselves? What if we whispered, even on the hardest days, "I see you, I hear you, you matter"? What if we softened not just for the world, but for the person in the mirror? Because as we retrain our hearts to hold ourselves with more tenderness, we also retrain the world. Every time we choose compassion over critique, every time we choose presence over avoidance, every time we risk being seen, even just a little, we create the conditions for connection. We create new pathways in our brains, new possibilities in our relationships and in our communities, new openings for the sacred to break through. We become, in every small act of courage, part of the great unfolding love story of this world. So let us start now. Let us begin again and again. If you are still learning how to be open, if your heart still hesitates before trusting, if your hands still shake before reaching out, I offer this blessing for you. May you know deep in your bones that you are worthy of love, and may you find the courage to let love in. May you be met with kindness when you risk showing up as yourself. May we as a community be a place where vulnerability is met with grace, where love is not a performance, but a sacred meeting of souls. This is a love letter for all of us, that we might remember our own worth, and that from that worth, authenticity might flow into connection, into community, and a new way of being will be born into each moment. Let's practice together until we're no longer afraid. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be. Thank you all. For our offering, which is also sacred work. Each week, we take an offering to support the mission and the work of our congregation. Since the pandemic, your generosity has been nearly the only source of financial support for the programs, the services, the outreach, and the staffing of the congregation, and has supported my internship and the internship of others. So thank you for that. Your giving is immediately put to work, putting our principles into action in our community and beyond. If you're joining us online, you can mail your gift to 87 4th Street, Ashland, Oregon, 97520. To give online, go to tinyurl.com/roofoffering and follow the instructions there. To give by text, simply text $sign and the amount you'd like to donate to 541-229-4229. If you need support, please contact Reverend Sean using the form on roof.org. We'll do our best to help. For these gifts and for all the gifts you bring to our community and into this world, thank you. Thank you for all of your gifts and everything else that you contribute to our community with your talents and your time. Please join us in our closing hymn, number 1053.
Please rise in body or spirit. We'll sing How Could Anyone? We're going to sing it. It's a very short tune, so let's sing it through twice. And if you haven't heard this before, it's a little emotional.
How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than a whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your
As we extinguish our chalice this morning, may we leave this space with open hearts and the courage to be seen, knowing in our breaking open, love and liberation begin. Go in peace, go in love, and go together, always. Blessed be.